Hey everybody, welcome to the Phillies Talk Podcast presented by Team Toyota. He's Jim Salisbury and I'm Corey Seidman. And Jim, here we are, the end of January, still no resolution with JT Realmuto, still a free agent. We've seen some landing spots dry up. On our most recent podcast at the end of last week, we talked about whether or not we thought the Braves' interest was legitimate. Where do things stand here? Any movement, do you think, between the sides?
Yeah, last week we talked about the Braves. There was that little idea floated out there that they were quote-unquote circling. And I'm sure there's a lot of teams monitoring the JT Realmuto negotiations, the whole free agent odyssey of the all-star catcher. But, you know, we haven't heard a lot about Atlanta since then. For a good long while now, I have felt that all roads lead back to Philadelphia for JT Realmuto. I still feel that way. And I feel like this thing has to pop soon. I really do. So here we are on Tuesday, and I'll be frank with you. I'd be surprised if we don't have a resolution on this by the weekend. And I still feel pretty optimistic that he ends up in Philadelphia.
Well, spring training is less than a month away. So when you talk about that, you know, that you think that something could happen imminently, is it just based on the fact that camp is drawing near, or do you get the sense that like negotiations just are where they are, the offers are what they are, and there isn't much left to figure out?
It's just based on kind of where we are in the baseball winter, that spring training is approaching, that he doesn't have a huge market, that there's a team here that has a very lucrative offer on the table for him that would like to sign him, and he had a good experience here. And it just feels like it's getting to be time. I don't have anything more than that, than just a gut feel on watching these things over the years, similar type of free agent situations, and it just feels like it's time to pop. I could be wrong, but, you know, I've reached that stage of the JT Realmuto drama where I'm sleeping with my eyes open, thinking it could come down at any point. But maybe I'm wrong, but sometimes intuition is a good reporter.
And how about the other guy, Didi Gregorius? There had been some inklings potentially that he could return. Now we're hearing about Andrelton Simmons a little bit. Andrelton Simmons, a free agent, probably a guy that you can get on a one-year deal. Still one of the best defensive shortstops in all of baseball. If you had to pick one of those two, do you think that the Phillies are valuing one over the other? Is it financially driven?
I think everything in this winter is financially driven. Obviously, you know, they want to put a good player there. That top three in the starting rotation last year, Wheeler, Nola, Eflin, they had like the second best ground ball percentage of Major League starting rotations in the majors. So you really want defense at shortstop. Simmons is a superior defender to Didi Gregorius. That said, I think they liked a lot of the intangibles and the offense, left-handed pop, that Didi brought to their lineup last year. So I think they'd be quite happy with either one. We were hearing a lot that things were looking pretty favorable on the Didi front over the last couple weeks. Lately, we've heard them checking out Simmons more. I don't know if it's some type of a negotiating ploy to get Didi to jump on board, or they're actually deep in on Simmons. But there's interest in both guys. Freddie Galvis, another guy that's out there, Marcus Semien. They've had contact with all of those agents throughout the winter, and they would love to lock down a shortstop here in the short term, get an idea of what they're going to do. And I still think Didi's in play, and Simmons very much in play. So, you know, they got Archie Bradley, last week and the week before, and I'm just feeling like Realmuto and the shortstop position could be solved here in the coming days. It's just kind of an educated guess based on just a lot of the chatter and the fact that spring training is steaming toward us, and the fact that this is, you know, guys want to know where they're going to be headed possibly in 3 weeks if it doesn't get moved back, spring training. And teams want to know teams want to reach a resolution on this stuff. It's been long enough. And it's clear that markets have been defined on players. So I just think everybody is ready for this, you know, to happen, both at shortstop and at catcher. And then, you know, all systems go for spring training.
No doubt. I mean, the Phillies still really don't know what team they have going into spring training yet, because two major holes, two major openings remain unresolved here. And as we talk about spring training bearing down, there was a statement released yesterday by the Cactus League in Arizona, their executive director of the Cactus League. Now, they do not have the authority to shut spring training down or delay it, but they strongly want to because of the COVID-19 infection rate in Maricopa County in Arizona. Unsettling news here 3 weeks before spring training. What do you sense could happen here? I mean, if things do shut down in Arizona, could teams be training at their home sites? Could we see the entire league descend upon Florida?
I think logistically it would be very difficult to put the entire league into Florida, just because Florida's got its own problems, and now you're overcrowding facilities, and they're already talking about, and they want to kind of lighten the load in spring training camps in terms of just the number of non-roster guys and number of personnel that's going to be down there. So I don't know that putting everybody in Florida is feasible, but that was a remarkable document to me from the the government leaders around the spring training sites in the Phoenix area, that they think they're suggesting it should be pushed back a couple weeks. And I'm not sure what a couple weeks is going to solve when you do the math at how many people are coming down with the virus and how many how many vaccines are being administered. It just doesn't seem to be keeping up. I'm not sure if 2 weeks is going to make that much of a difference. Obviously, the players, they want to get to camp. They want to have 162. They want to get paid for the full freight. Been a lot of reports that owners wouldn't mind backing the season up a month. There's still a chance they could play 162 with 7-inning doubleheaders. But, it's just so uncertain, and everybody's at the mercy of this virus. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know when the government gets involved, they supersede baseball, right? I saw it, more than a decade ago when the government got involved in the steroid hearings, and we all kind of, that's grandstanding. Well, they affected change. We see it now with the pandemic, with governments stepping in, local governments, and saying you can have fans and you can't have fans. I mean, they ultimately are going to make the decision here, and if they really want to push for it, I think Major League Baseball will have to respond to those government entities. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. And if they make a call out in Arizona, just for the sake of competitive balance, competition, right? You would think they'd have to make a similar call in Florida. You don't want, I don't know if you can have half the teams in full preparation, the other half sitting idle. So it still remains a huge issue.
Couldn't those teams affected that play spring training in Arizona, couldn't they kind of just train in their like home areas the way that teams did for spring training 2.0 last summer?
I suppose that's a possibility, but you do have a team that is right in Arizona. You have other teams in Southern California, and it's not in great shape there. I just don't know how they would rectify it. I guess that's possible. But it would certainly, in some cases, affect teams playing exhibition games. I'm thinking of Colorado. I'm thinking of Seattle. Those two teams are kind of geographically isolated from other teams. It'd be difficult, I think, for them to play exhibition games. And then you have teams like the two Chicago teams in Milwaukee. It's still pretty cold up there. I guess Milwaukee's got a dome. They could do some things, but who knows?
Jim, I don't know if you've been paying attention to what's going on in the NBA, but there have been so many games postponed by either COVID or the risk of COVID spreading. It's affecting numerous teams. In baseball, it happened to the Marlins early in the season. It happened to the Cardinals, and those games got postponed, but there were really, no big issues after that. Whereas in the NBA, this is affecting multiple teams, and the teams they're playing are having their games postponed. It's just a far cry from what we saw last summer in MLB.
Yeah, it just tells you the uncertainty of this thing, and we don't really know where it's going, and we're all at the mercy of it. And, now this virus is affecting the second season in all of these sports. We saw basketball bubble up in the summer and have their tournament and their postseason tournament and their championship. I just wonder now if we're into the second season of dealing with all these protocols, if there's a little bit more virus fatigue, or people get a little casual and put down their guard. And I don't know if we'll see that in baseball as we enter a second season with the virus. I think for the most part, baseball teams were pretty vigilant and followed the protocols pretty diligently last year, save for that early outbreak on the Marlins that happened right here in Philadelphia. I think they got a little casual. But after their outbreak with the Marlins, they certainly seemed to be scared straight and paid better attention to it and ended up going to the playoffs, if you remember. So, it's a great unknown. I read yesterday that the University of Michigan has called a timeout on all of their wintertime sports because they have the new variant showing up of the virus. Again, that's indicative of we just don't know. It's indicative of what a beast this thing is, and that it is bigger than all of these games, and it's bigger than athletes. And, you have to be very, very mindful of it. So I just don't know how it's going to affect the MLB season, but we're going to get some answers pretty soon because, like you mentioned, that document by the government leaders in Arizona, it's something MLB is going to have to think about. And if the government starts putting pressure on MLB will have to respond. So who knows what this season is going to look like? Who knows what spring training is going to look like? I'm just hoping that this thing clears and everybody gets a vaccine and we can move on as a mankind, not just as a baseball and a sporting community, because everything else, dwarfs that.
No doubt. I mean, knowing what we know now and watching how other sports are responding, it wouldn't surprise me if when the 2021 baseball season does start, that if a situation happens like there's an outbreak with a team like the Marlins, right? We saw the Phillies had postponements for a couple days there, and then they resumed their schedule, picked up that series against the Yankees. Whereas, like in the NBA, if you're facing a team and that team has an outbreak, they're like the Memphis Grizzlies had 5 games postponed in a row because the team they played had it, Right. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are more precautions put into place there. And if that situation arises again, we might have to see a team in that position sit for a few days. But the goal is to get 162 games played. It's not necessarily to get it done in the exact way that the schedule is shakes out at the beginning of the season. Jim, moving over to free agency, back to free agency here in the NL East. We saw Brad Hand join the Nationals on a 1-year deal worth $10.5 million, reportedly. Brad Hand was the top reliever on the market after Liam Hendricks and Archie Bradley came off the board, non-tendered at the beginning of the offseason, actually released so the Indians didn't have to pay that buyout. Very good left-handed reliever. Could have helped the Phillies and should sure help the Nationals.
He will help the Nationals. He is very, very good. It has been good for a number of years. They've actually put together a few pieces at the back of that bullpen, and I think they had a World Series hangover. They didn't play well last year. They had some injuries, but I think they had a World Series hangover as well in 2020, and that affected their performance in a short season. I just think, the delay, the short season, and the hangover was all this perfect storm that really impacted that team's performance. So I would not sleep on them in 2021 at all. I would think they'd come back hungry. Obviously, they got to get Strasburg healthy, but you got Corbin. Interested to see how Scherzer does. He's getting up there a little bit. He's had some nicks and bruises, but when healthy, still a great pitcher. Like I said, they've done some good things at the back of the bullpen. They have Soto. They have Trey Turner. They added Schwarber. I take that bat in my lineup any day, right? And they've done, some good things. John Lester, he's not, an ace anymore, but I certainly think he can give them innings in the 4 or 5 spot and keep them in a lot of ball games. So I actually kind of like their winter.
Yeah, John Lester is basically replacing Anibal Sanchez in the rotation. They're not asking him to be an ace anymore, obviously.
Right.
The Kyle Schwarber news, well, we got the news yesterday that the MLBPA rejected the league's proposal for the DH with expanded playoffs. Not necessarily because the players don't want the DH, but because they don't think that's a fair trade-off. DH for expanded playoffs, plus the CBA expires pretty soon, and that's a big bargaining chip. Do you think that there's a possibility in 2021 we could see either of those things happen, or does that latest news kind of spell that 2021 might be pitchers hitting again?
Yeah, I don't think the DH possibility for 2021 is dead. I mean, this is the way negotiations work, ebb and flow, back and forth. I still think there's a good chance. And I still think, wisdom might prevail here. Pitchers didn't hit last year. Probably not going to hit in the new CBA. What are we waiting for, right? For 1 year, get it done, right? Do it in 2021. Have the DH. I just think these two sides seldom agree on anything easily, and this is just another case of that. If I could double back to Hand, because you mentioned he signed for 10.5, and that he only had a $10 million option that the Indians let him go on, and a lot of teams could have had him for that. I've gotten a lot of inquiries on, why wouldn't the Phillies strike on that? I just think, and again, I certainly would have struck. I'd love to have that guy for that price tag, right? I just think the Phillies in this this winter with sort of the revenue declines throughout the game, and we've seen a lot of teams budget for that one signing, right? Yankees sort of budgeted for DJ LeMahieu, freed up some money yesterday by moving away from trading Adam Ottavino. I think they could use that maybe for Brett Gardner, use that for more bullpen help, use that for starting pitching depth, use it to stay under the luxury tax. But on the Phillies case, I just think it's a matter of, they signed Archie Bradley for $6 million. That was going to be their big expenditure in the bullpen, maybe add some other guys at lower salaries. But when I look at even that $10 million, I think it's probably in the budget for a JT Realmuto deal. If they don't get Realmuto, then, maybe they kick themselves for not going in that route. But I still think all signs point to them getting Realmuto, as we talked about earlier. But I think passing on Hand to answer a lot of inquiries is simply just about, budgeting for the catcher.
Well, I got an interesting variation of that question on Twitter from Marty Bergen. Thought this was a pretty good question. He asked that for, the same amount of money, $21 million or so, would you rather have JT Realmuto or James McCann and Brad Hand? It depends on the team context. JT Realmuto is the best overall player of the three, but when you think about how much better off the Phillies would be if they had one more lockdown reliever at the end of their bullpen, if they could go 7 innings from Nolan Wheeler, then to Archie Bradley, then to Brad Hand, all of a sudden that's a team that could fight for the playoffs if everybody stays healthy and things go well. But yeah, they probably had a certain amount of money allotted for relief help, certain amount of money allotted toward the top free agents that they wanted to retain. And there's still some relievers available, just nobody in the class of Brad Hand.
No, but there are a ton. I got a list on my desk, cross them off as they sign. There's still a lot of good ones out there. Guys that have had, they got a little mileage. But there's, guys I think out there that could possibly help. I keep coming back to Shane Green. He's a guy that they had interest in the past. Trying to think who else popped up on my notebook this morning.
Colomé is still out there.
Colomé is still out there. A guy like Soria has had a really good career, still out there. Clippard, I think, is
Steve
out
Cishek.
there. Who's that?
Steve Cishek is still out there.
And they watched his workout the other day. He's still out there. I think he struggled a little bit in 2020, but heck, it was, a short season. These relievers are getting 15 appearances.
I still like Sergio Romo. He's 38 years old, but that slider is still as good as ever, and he's coming off of a couple solid seasons with the Twins.
Yeah, that slider is amazing. We used to see it all the time with San Francisco. He's a gamer too, man. I like him. So I think as spring training gets closer, there might be some interesting bargains, we might say, on the relief market. So just
who's still out there? Brandon Workman. Bring him back. What do you think?
I'm telling you, the guy that interests me, though, and I'm going to get angry emails for this, I'm sure. The guy I would do on a minor league deal is Phelps.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. You're not going to send me you're not going to send me an angry email?
No, look, a lot has changed financially, right? But at the end of last season, we were talking about, could the Phillies pick up David Phelps' option? Yeah, he pitched horribly after the trade, but his track record the previous 3-4 seasons was, almost spotless.
Right. And he pitched so good before he came over. it happens to relievers. They have a bad month, right? They're awful for 3 weeks, and all of a sudden, they're the last guy you want to bring it to a game, and then all of a sudden something clicks and they have a couple good months. So on a minor league deal, I would take a shot on David Phelps, even knowing that he really struggled here last year. I would definitely take a look at him in camp.
All right. Well, our next podcast is Friday morning. Jim, do you think we'll know about JT by then? What do you think?
I sure hope so, man. I sure hope so. I'm tired of sleeping with my eyes open.
Hear you. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Phillies Talk Podcast. We are brought to you by Team Toyota. He's Jim and I'm Corey. Talk to you later in the week.